Today's fly is the pussy willow, which is quite obviously a variant of the woolly bugger. It's unweighed, and with the main feature of it being this rib of silver tinsel chenille. Nobody knows who first tied one of these, but it did originate in British Columbia. So I found an old newsletter online that talks about this fly being used in the Fraser River by an angler called Stan Ogden, and apparently it outfished everything else. Then it shows up in Les Johnson's book, where it's included among saltwater patterns. Now, I've always carried a few beadhead woolly buggers in black and olive, just to use when nothing else is working, and I've picked up a few fish with them, but I really do think that this pussy willow here is just in a completely different league. So on my last two outings, I've seen lots of fish jumping and chasing bait, but just haven't been able to tempt them with any of the usual things I use. So I tied on a pussy willow, and for whatever reason, it just seemed to drive the fish crazy. I caught some on it, but I've had many more really vicious short strikes that I've missed, and I've seen some really big cuts following it all the way in, just rolling over it and snapping at it, just like it was a surface popper. And the only way I get results with it is if I strip it really fast as I possibly can and keep it up in the water. But it's a really intriguing pattern, and I'm just looking forward to experimenting with it some more. So I'm going to tie this on an RX NS118. These are truly awesome hooks, very strong and sharp, and made in Norway, so they've got to be good. But any 4x long hook should do. Go with a downturned eye if you want that classic look. So my thread is UTC 70 in black. Doesn't have to be very strong thread. You could go with 140 if you wanted. So I'm going to make a thread base down the length of the shank. No need here for touching turns or anything like that, as you know, it's going to be all covered up with chenille. Okay, trim away the excess. And I'm just using plain old strung black marabou for the tail. Nothing fancy is required. And I picked out a feather that has some nice tips, nice fine tips. I want the tail to be about the same length as the hook shank, maybe just a little bit shorter, so I want to keep those short strikes to a minimum. I'm going to lash this into place just with a few pinch wraps. So I'm going to trim this to about one eye's length from the front of the hook, and I'm going to tie it all down more tightly as I go back with the thread back to the tie-in point. I want to add just a small amount of black flashabou to the tail. I'm just going to take myself 3 strands of that. Okay. And first I'm just going to tie it into the side that's nearest me. Taking care not to get that hook point. Then I'll fold the flashabou over to the other side. And then tie that in too. I'm going to cut the flash to the length of the tail. Okay, so the body is medium black chenille. This stuff. I'll cut a length of that and then just use my thumbnail to strip away the fibers, just exposing a length of the core that I can tie in without too much bulk. I'm going to secure it in place with just enough wraps to get it into position. Right there, and then just clip that out of the way. Okay, next up is the silver tinsel, which I think is really the special sauce in this pattern. I had a lot of difficulty getting this as all the big name suppliers were out of stock, so I finally tracked some down to a little outfit called Creative Angler who are on Amazon. But it is part of the Hairline catalogue, so you know it should be available. So I'm just going to do the same thing with this that I did to tie in the black chenille. Just strip it off a bit. It's quite... yeah. Just tie it in at exactly the same spot. Just enough to keep it in place. Okay, now for hackle, I'm using black saddle feather from one of Whiting's bugger packs. If you're new to fly tying, you'll save yourself a whole lot of frustration by just investing in a few of those. They are the best thing out there, and you can use them for many different applications. So I prepared my hackle by exposing and clipping the tip, and I'm going to tie that in on my side. Just trap it. There. And I'm just going to continue to wrap forward, just securing some of those loose ends as I go. Again, it just doesn't have to look perfect because I'm going to be covering this up in just a moment. So I'm going to leave my thread at the front, grab the black chenille, and then just wind that on with tightly touching turns. Just keep the tension on. Okay, trap it, tie it off. And then trim the excess away from the top. Now I'm going to take my hackle and just palmer that down the length of the hook. And I'll try and adjust the stem as I go to make sure that all the fibers are facing the way I want. And tying it in at the back by the tip, of course, means that the longer fibers are going to be towards the front, which is how you want it to be. You could tie it in by the butt at the front and then work back, but then you have to do extra ribbing to secure it. I think this is the way to go. So I'm going to tie that off in the front. Really put in quite a few turns to make sure it's going to stay in place. Cut away the excess. Now my silver chenille, just going to work it in between the hackle as I go forward. I'm going to try and get 5 turns on this size 8 4x long hook. That's my 5 turns. retract that, tie it off. And again, trim away by the top. Now I'm going to do my best to neatly cover all those ends and make a little thread head. And this is where it might pay to use a bigger size thread. You have to take quite a lot of wraps to cover this. A few more. Okay, I'll put in a whip finish and cut my thread off. Now I'll finish the fly by adding a bit of UV fly finish, my favorite Loon product. You could use head cement or varnish or Sally Hansen's or just whatever you like to use. I do like the look of that black flashaboo in the tail under the UV. I'm sure that's part of the attraction of the pattern. Just a drop more, I think. And there it is. Definitely not the prettiest pattern in the world, but give it a try. And I think you'll find it's a real killer. So thanks for watching. Take care now. Bye bye.